Look at this.
Okay, for those who are following on the recording, good morning. We're going to continue. We're going a little out of order. We had that teshuva that Rabbi Barmash put in her book about a sexual predator in the synagogue, sexual offender in the synagogue, and that led to us looking at various ways in which synagogues have tried to come up with policies and have dealt with issues of sexual offenders in the synagogue. And it also led to the question about, well, what about Jewish leaders and synagogues in a larger context of sexual harassment, and what are some of the rules and what are some of the examples? So we started looking at that last week. We're going to continue this week, looking at a couple of specifics and a couple of general rules as well. We looked at some general rules last week. Now start the screen share. Let's see. It's not there. Wait a second. Show when you do the screen share, they sometimes only put up some of the windows. I typically have a lot of windows out there, and you have to do an extra click to show all the windows.
You're there now.
There we are. Okay. Yes, we're at the text that we were looking at that we were in the midst of last week, which was from Rabbi Neil Toe, who was at the Glen Rock Jewish Center at one point.
Needs to be
And
a little
a
larger, Rabbi.
little larger, no problem.
For me,
How's
at
that?
least.
Is that good?
Yes, better.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it just comes up the size, the quote normal size, and it's easy to make them a little bit larger. We had started looking at some of the texts, and we actually had come upon this text, which he brings about playing the music of a songwriter who was rumored to engage in disreputable behavior. Now, this is from 1959. As I pointed out last week, I have absolutely no idea who he's talking about, and I think for probably clear reasons he didn't want to spread the name in this part of the teshuva from Rabbi Mark Drak. There was no name mentioned. That was this is 1959, which, by the way, is both a long time ago and was a time when a lot of what was going on in terms of sexual harassment was not being spoken about. We've certainly seen with the At Me Too movement, and a lot of this has become more public, much to the betterment of the entire community, not to mention the Jewish community, as we have also seen some unfortunate incidents and some materials coming out about Jewish leaders, and unfortunately, across the board, doesn't from you name the movement, I can name names, but but unfortunately, that has come out, and some of these individuals were very prominent and influential. So here we have this question, where he says, based on Rabbi Feinstein's, one might distinguish between the teachings and insights of a heretic. Now he's talking specific, not just about somebody who did something wrong, but talking about, because of some of the traditional sources, moreover talk about heretics before and after. But there are those who come to the exact opposite conclusion. It is entirely forbidden, even to regard to the tunes composed while he was still kosher. So that was one of the questions. So we find out something about someone, and specifically if there was, okay, this point, we know this person was doing things wrong. What do we do? And there are some sources that he brings. I want to take a look at his sources, and then we're going to take a look at, I did send out some specific material about the most unfortunate and public case, which was the Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. So let's just take a look at some of the sources that Rabbi Toe brings, and then we'll very specifically go into this question of Rabbi Carlebach. So Rabbi Toe, brings this question: can we learn? The Gemara asks a question. Rabbi Meir, how could he learn Torah from the mouth of Acher? Now, Acher was Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya. And there's a whole series of discussions. He is quoted in the Talmud, events that happened to him. He became a heretic. and they don't like to mention his name, so they call him Acher, other, the other one. There's a wonderful novel by Milton Steinberg called As a Driven Leaf, which I highly recommend, which talks about Rabbi Akiva and his relationships with a rabbi who became a heretic. Okay, what is the meaning? For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek Torah from his mouth, for he's an angel of the Lord of hosts. From the prophets. The verse teacher, the rabbi is similar to an angel of the Lord of hosts, perfect in his ways. They should seek Torah from his mouth. But if not, they should not seek Torah from his mouth, which would seem to imply that perhaps before the quote event, his teachings were okay. But we have some other sources. It is forbidden to learn from anyone who is a heretic to the faith. But if he could not find another to learn from, study from him and be careful that he does not stray after him. When there are alternatives, seek alternative sources of wisdom. So here's an even more liberal suggestion that you could do so. And finally, from Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, a rabbi who does not follow the good way, though he be a great scholar and all of the people stand in need of him, no instruction should be received from him until his return to goodness, as it is said, for the priest's lips shall keep knowledge, that they should seek the Lord's mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. Again, that's the same quote. Thereupon they say, if the rabbi be like the messenger of the Lord of hosts, then they shall seek law at his mouth. If not, they shall not seek law at his mouth, which seems to imply that perhaps the previous teachings would be okay. So that there's this question which we talked about last week. When you find out someone has done something really bad or has been guilty of sexual harassment, do you just say nothing that this person ever did or taught is now kosher and we should just ignore it, forget it? Or can we say that some of the previous stuff was okay? All right, we'll get back to this text because it obviously talks about something that we have. Here it is. And the most well-known and famous example, and this is unfortunate, was Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. Anybody here ever go to a Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach concert? Hear him in person? Yeah, I did. Right. Anybody have his CDs? Oh, I got a load of CDs somewhere. I actually can't find them. And I'm not sure what happened. And we never go to a service where it was like a Carlebach service. Let's all sing the music of Carlebach. Well, that was very popular at one time. Wait, let me step back. Are we familiar with that name?
Yes.
Yes.
Go on. Just a little background. I actually was at a concert where he sang and actually was very close to the stage and did observe some things that happened after the concert was over, which I'll mention a little bit later. Okay, this is an article that appeared in 1998. Some of you may be familiar with Lilith magazine. It's a Jewish feminist magazine. And they talked about how he was someone he steeped in Hasidic tradition, very traditional, but committed to the spiritual rights of women. And you may know that there's a group called Women of the Wall who read from their Torah at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, usually on Rosh Chodesh. They've been doing that for years, and every time they do it, there's protests, and it's become a great point of pride for the Women of the Wall and a great deal of contention in Israel. I was actually at one of their services on a Rosh Chodesh when I was in Israel once, and I will tell you, it's very, very spiritually, very beautiful service. And at that morning, you could see that they had bussed in women from different yeshivot so that there was no room on the women's section at the actual wall, right next to the wall. It was jammed with women who were going to be there so that the women of the wall could not go to be close to the wall. So we were in the back of the sort of behind that, there's a large area behind, there's the wall, then there's an area with a mechitza, and then behind that, there's a fairly large open area. And we were in the large open area behind it. And still, there were people who were yelling at us and screaming, but it was beautiful. Okay, so here what is a man who comes from the Hasidic movement, um, who was sent out by the Lubavitcher Rebbe to bring in Jews to Judaism. And in 1989, which quite a while ago, was uh, being part of the feminist movement. Okay, an Orthodox rabbi by training, he took down the separation between men and women in his own synagogue, got rid of the mechitza, which that is the classic way of defining an Orthodox synagogue. Encouraged women to study and teach Jewish texts. Private ordination to women before mainstream institutions would do. A musical genius, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, right? We all know that one, right? Most of you, many of you may know that. A lot of melodies. Large number of CDs. There were synagogues at one time that would advertise Shlomo Carlebach service this week using only Shlomo Carlebach melodies, and they would be very popular. Many synagogues now have been influenced by this concept of, gee, we really need joyous singing with everybody is together and really feeling the spirit. And Shlomo Carlebach was really in the midst of starting that at one point. He encouraged women to sing out loud. You can't hear a woman's voice. He abandoned the Orthodox injunction that men and women should not touch publicly. He was known for his frequent hugs of men and women. He often said his hope was to hug every Jew, perhaps every person on earth. Yeah, after this concert that I attended with Shlomo Carlebach, I literally saw him going around hugging lots of women. It didn't seem that odd at the time. This is like 1978, I think, somewhere around 1977, 78. And I thought, oh, yeah, he likes people, he likes to hug people. And I saw him hug a lot of women. In the 3 years since Carlebach's death at age 69, ceremonies honoring his life and work have been interrupted by women who claim the rabbi sexually harassed or abused them. In dozens of recent interviews, Lilith has attempted to untangle and explain Rabbi Carlebach's complex legacy. Yeah, what sort of legacy is there to someone who is guilty of sexually abusing people? Is it, well, before we knew it, it's okay. It was okay. Now we know about it. Should we sing his songs at all? Or should his songs be prohibited? There were some examples they give in the article, of Canada. A number of his followers have reminded us that Carlebach walked with the humblest of humble, never said he was a holy man. At his death, an outpouring of love and a degree of idolization that did not easily allow followers to recognize what others generally call his shadow side. He was bigger than life, okay? He really was. I mean, an amazing figure, almost at every other Soviet Jewry rally. He would be there singing, and everyone would be singing with him. But in 1997, stories of inappropriate behavior began to be discussed widely. There was a rabbi who wrote, I have a responsibility to the women who have confided in me. They deserve a place on the page of the collective members of Shlomo Carlebach. This part of the article goes very specifically into some of the charges against him. It is not just isolated one or two. There are a significant number of women who have credible stories of what he did. He started to rub and rock against me. It just goes on and on. Some years later, a teacher in studies visited him. He started touching her, fondling her breasts, and worse. I almost don't want to read this out loud because, to tell you the truth, it's very clear that we have some very serious charges rubbing against women, and they came out, the stories came out. And some have said in private and often with deep pain about experience they had when they were women when they were in their teens. Um, Shlomo came to a camp. He singled them out with some excuse, fondled their breasts and vagina, sometimes thrusting himself against them and muttering something which they now believe was Yiddish. These are credible stories. So the question is, what happened? What should happen? And they give you some details. First, there was silence. Why was there silence at first? Why do you think there was silence?
Weren't sure that
Okay, people weren't sure that was true. But what other dynamic was working here?
shock.
Shock. Okay.
It was
How could
incredible
such
when you didn't believe it.
yeah, they here right. Here is a man who has done so much good, has so many followers, has really ignited sparks of holiness in so many people. Is it possible that he could have done so many terrible things? And then there's this other question, not only of science and protecting the stature, power, just how powerful and intimate an impact any spiritual leader may have on followers. It is not uncommon for extremely charismatic leaders to take advantage of their power.
How about a Chandelier Goy?
Yeah, it's terrible. It was terrible.
I'm just
Yeah, Charlie, go ahead, Charlie.
But can a person be legitimately good and bad? I mean,
Well,
aren't we all composites of goodness and badness? I mean, everyone has their flaws.
Unquite. That's an excellent question. Everyone has their flaws.
But this is beyond. This is beyond. He really took advantage of his position.
I mean, I'm going to do a book review, a movie review on Leonard Bernstein. We're doing it about 2 months from now. The movie by Maestro. I suggest you see it. Here's a guy who's one of the great musicians of all time, and yet he was a deeply flawed man with a lot of personal baggage. So
Right.
I mean, and he's an icon. He's still considered an icon.
Oh, there's no question Bernstein is considered an icon. I have many recordings of his music, and there was just a concert 2 weeks ago.
We're all got a mixture of very bad things and very good things.
But you can't compare Carlsbach with Bernstein. Carlsbach molested tons of women.
When you see the movie, you'll find out.
I saw the movie. He was a homosexual, so that was fine. He was.
Oh, he loved men. Okay. He loved men like many men love women. I mean,
there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it, but there's a flaw. It's considered a flaw.
It's not a flaw. It's human. Okay. It's human.
Okay.
Well, the question.
I'll accept that. Okay. I accept that. That's fine.
Right. Okay. That flaw. He was homosexual. We all know that. And you see the movie. It's very clearly pointed out. He got married. He had children, as was very common in those days for male homosexuals to hide it and to marry. Here, though, when we talk about a religious leader who has tremendous charisma and following, when he or she, let's not be gender specific, commits sexual crimes against some of the followers, is that on a different level beyond saying, yes, each of us has good and bad traits? Because here is somebody who has followers, who is really being seen as someone to emulate and has power and influence over others. And here we're talking about a religious leader violating some very distinct and important rules within sexual relations. I understand your question. I agree with you. Everybody's got good and bad traits, right? With no one, no, I mean, we're talking cliches here. Nobody's perfect. And yes, certain people, John F. Kennedy. Hey, John F. Kennedy was worse, right? Of course. If you want to talk about political leaders, that to me, that's a fascinating question about the moral stature of political leaders. Bill Clinton, he had some very serious moral flaws. But here we're talking about religious leaders specifically. Let's ask the question, should the rules be different for religious leaders?
No.
Yeah, okay, Rini, and then okay, well,
I don't know if I'm yeah. Actually, yes, religious leaders almost, I think, should be held to a higher standard because people look up to them for guidance. I mean, I was shocked when Bill Cosby was really revealed to have done all those terrible things, but I don't look up to Bill Cosby for spiritual guidance or guidance in how to run my life. I look up to my rabbi or other, rabbis, and it's disheartening, to say the least, when they do something wrong and they're supposed to be leading you, on the right path.
Right, of course. But even with Bill Cosby, was he not the model of a father and a family?
He was. Yeah, it was shocking, but he wasn't in the same category as a rabbi or a priest or somebody who, is teaching you to be a good person and follow certain ethical.
Okay, so you could still listen to his comedy albums.
Not
after
anymore.
He was convicted.
Not anymore.
Oh no, now you won't. Okay.
Well, I don't, because I don't appreciate them anymore.
Oh, did you watch the Cosby Show?
I watched it. Yes, we even went to a taping of it, all four of us. And we loved it. And then when he came out to be this really horrible person who not only was a predator, but who drugged women, then I couldn't watch them anymore because I wasn't watching the same person.
Ah, okay.
So that was why I couldn't watch it.
Okay, so we're trying to say, do religious leaders stand in a different place? In other words, can you be a good political leader? John F. Kennedy. Do we still quote from his speeches and think, hey, that was almost messianic, right? When he was in office early on. Don't you remember the early 60s when he became president? Wow, we are going to solve the world's problems. And then it all came out that, again, he was, okay, we don't know about, quote, sexual abuse, but he certainly was an adulterer, and he was certainly lying about a lot of stuff. So,
FDR too.
I'm sorry, Carol.
FDR also.
FDR as well, and Eisenhower. There's a lot has come up about the, shall we say, sexual rules that many of these leaders have violated. So, do we stop hearing or listening to them? I see someone with an iPad. Is that you, Jack? I know you've got your hand up. I know you've had some trouble. Can you get yourself off of the mute?
No, he cannot.
No. Okay. Sorry. Other people want to comment on this. Are the religious leaders held in a different category so that in this case, with the sexual harassment, we feel that negates all or some of what they have done in a positive pattern? Yeah. Let me see if anyone else.
Yeah.
Where is that? Someone wants to speak?
Jack is not on mute.
Jack is not on mute. Jack, can we hear you? Can you talk? I don't know. Okay, anyone else want to comment on that? See, okay, okay, again.
Just 2 points. One, I think we do have to separate the man from the art. Sometimes an artist can make a great painting like Picasso, or a great work of music like Wagner, and should they be categorized on their politics or some other measure?
I mean, that's a good question. Frankly, I don't listen to Wagner, but you know, that's just me.
But
But I do listen to,
Bernstein in particular championed these. I think Wagner was one of. No, he wasn't his favorite composer, but he would play Wagner.
he would play Wagner, yeah, sure. And Stravinsky, who was one of my favorite composers, was an anti-Semite. You know, I still listen to.
So do you separate the man from the art? I mean,
Right.
you
Okay, that's the
condemn
man of the art. But here,
the
but what
art
about
along
the,
with the man? No, I
what
don't.
about the religious teacher?
Right.
But now we're talking about religious leadership. We're questioning whether that same, you know, can you really separate? Because ultimately, do you expect the religious leader to act in a way that is coherent with his religious teachings? Or
I
Tammy,
believe Carlbach's art transcends his reputation.
the art. So
Yeah,
Charlie, do you think synagogues should have Carlebach services?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Tammy, you were going to comment.
Yeah, I think I agree with Rini that the rabbis are supposed to be ethical, moral leaders. And if they have no ethics and morals, they shouldn't be leaders. And I agree with Charlie that art is art. You know, if he created this beautiful song and we like the song, it's the song. It's not Karl Bach. But he was despicable. He was a very despicable person. And that first attachment that you sent to was a real shanda that for 20 years that congregation couldn't throw out that guy who was a molester. I mean, the rabbi, the president, that
Oh,
whole
yeah.
congregation should be thrown to the wolves. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
horrible.
Yes, there are some other texts we're talking about very specific. The reluctance of institutions. Again, we see these issues, right? Silence, right? Power, where institutions are reluctant to take a stand. And we'll see also when we talk about the Joseph story, how people who talk about sexual harassment are then seen sometimes, and what happens to them. The Joseph story has some interesting examples. But here again, silence, protect the man, you're cowed by their presence, power, right? Extremely charismatic leaders to take advantage of their power, and that communal responsibility. In cases where a rabbi's self-restraint fails, perhaps the Jewish community needs to look at its own responsibility. If Kalbach's sexual advances indeed spanned decades and continents, I'm afraid they did, as has been alleged, and were indeed as well known as it now appears, then we must ask, what might have been done on behalf of the women who may have been hurt? What can be done for them today? You know, and what should have been done to Kalbach, who we assume may have been troubled by this. So these are, Charlie, I would to tell you, in terms of the art question, I guess I have a line. I'm not a Wagner fan,
Yeah,
but I do like Stravinsky. And okay, so Mahler converted to Christianity, but if he wanted to be the conductor of the Vienna Opera and he couldn't do it otherwise, all right, I'll forgive him for that. So talk about heretics, right? Let's say Mahler was a heretic. Okay, I can live with that.
Different from molestation.
Yeah. But here we're talking about religious leaders, and I would
Right.
argue that there's a higher level of moral excellence we anticipate. Okay,
I assume
Sure.
some of us are aware of rabbis in our own congregation at one time who allegedly were having some kind of affairs with congregants.
Oh, there's no question that these things happen. And again, what sometimes happens, if it's just allegations and you can't prove anything. On the other hand, I will just say this, as I've said before, non-disclosure agreements are often signed. When when you see a religious leader abruptly leave a congregation, I remember this happened, and I won't give you the details. And one of my colleagues said about this, oh, that religious leader must have gotten a really good job to leave abruptly a situation where he was set for life. To which I replied, I don't think so. There was obviously something going on and we never found out. But that's the sort of thing that does happen. You're right. I mean, the question is also whether if there are allegations and there's no proof, right? Which is also often the case, right? Yeah, Tammy.
Okay. Rabbis are teachers. They're not gods. They're not angels. They're human beings just like everybody else. But there's one thing about having an affair, but it's one other thing about molesting people. So, you do draw the line, and there's a difference between somebody who's a chronic molester and an abuser versus somebody who had a little affair with somebody else because that other person was willing to do it too. But somebody who's an adulterer,
Although
yeah,
yeah, I would agree with you on that. But some of the cases that have come up have asked the question, given the power relationships,
right.
how willing was the other party, given the differential in the type of power. And that is, again, I'm not going to name names, but there were some very significant leaders within various movements who have been accused of having, quote, affairs. And the real questions as to, yeah, well, how much was it a question of mutual agreement versus unequal power?
I agree. I agree.
Those are questions. All right. So now we go down to, what happened. Right there, the dam of silence has broken. It's a long article, and I recommend that you read. Those of you who have it can read the whole thing.
Oh, that's good.
It's a very disturbing article. Nevertheless, for many who heard Carlbach as a holy guide have a conundrum. How is it possible that a person who can affect us so powerfully, right, can at the same time be imperfect and do the things that we find very, very hard to countenance, indeed cannot countenance, right? There's a cognitive dissonance between, wow, I went to a Carlbach service and I've never been as moved spiritually as I have through the singing of Carlbach songs. And now I find out of all this, right? The difficulty of holding both parts of that was a typo. Carlbach in mind come to relief as these allegations have collided in full force with the reverence many still feel for him. Some of his followers have jumped to his defense. Lilith has received both the outrage and praise of those trying to stop the publication of this article, right? Once this, there are people who can't. There are people who can't believe it. Sometimes, I know this is hard to say, people don't accept facts when it's in dissonance with some of their deeply held beliefs. And facts, we like to think that's the problem with us, some of us liberals. We always like to think that facts can change people's minds. Guess what? Not always true. Not always true. If we only could argue and show them this fact, everything would be over. Well, but we understand. Coming as far as Israel, comments have ranged from denial that such actions could have taken place to testimonials to his greatness. More than anything, these calls, emails, and faxes have demanded in various ways that we perpetuate the silence. And that's what happened when these things came out. It is not uncommon when women come forward with their stories of inappropriate sexual contact with rabbi or clergy that the members of the congregation or community so much want to disbelieve those shocking allegations that they vilify the complainant and glorify the alleged abuser. That's a pattern that we see, right? This is about our relations to power, rabbinics, and patriarchy. It's about women who are hurt. I think in the name of a higher good, that one man's reputation, we must talk about this. It's about truth. And if we keep saying that he was a great man, and if we don't name the behavior and don't hold him in the spirit and his memory accountable, we are colluding in perpetrating the behavior and violence in our most spiritual center. Now, I wanted to take a look at, this is more about, I think we talked about that, how, it's very hard for people to come forward. If someone may be privileged to receive the special attention, about the clergy, feel betrayed. A victim may not believe that a beloved person, even the victim, him or herself, cannot believe that this really happened. It's difficult because of the psychological pressures to protect a good name. Something apparently benign, a victim may be very confused. A victim and those around may not know how to respond. There's tremendous polarity between the people who have to deny it and those who agree that it happened and it's a crime. If you assume that a young girl is a person and not an object, then the reactions are not overblown. So now I wanted to go to, let me see if I can find this easily, to look at a response by some of you may know that Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach has a daughter, Neshama Carlebach. Some of you have
Singer also.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
She's
And
very active. She's still around doing
oh
concerts.
yes.
Yep.
She's married to Rabbi Menachem Creditor. Right. These are very important people in the Jewish community. Now this is fairly more recent. It's time to stop making excuses for Carlebach. This is by, I didn't look up the author, but basically pointing out what's going on here. And here it talks about, notice the difference between
Weinstein.
Weinstein, right?
Yep. Bob Weinstein.
When Roman Polanski, Bill Cosby, and Willie, you watch Woody Allen movies?
Yes.
Annie Hall.
Willie Allen made some great movies.
By the way, Roberts just died. His
Tony Roberts, yes.
yeah.
His sane companion, right? I know. But Weinstein, was expelled. There was more agitation about him, Cosby or Polanski, despite the fact that Polanski pleaded guilty to drugging and raping a 13-year-old. Right? So can you still watch a Polanski movie? And then here's something saying in December 2014, I wrote a post referencing the Lilith article. On the one hand, Carlebach was simply the messenger sent to uncover a truth of the beauty in this world. Perhaps we should continue to enjoy his music, or since it was the popularity afforded him by the art that gave him the power to abuse with impunity, it was inappropriate to benefit from the tools he used to abuse people. Here, he's trying to see, these are the two sides of this argument. Perhaps the truth was somewhere in the middle. Perhaps the babies could be salvaged from that putrid bathwater. I ended the article with a question, a plea for feedback. So here's a man who, that now what's happened after at Me Too, right? This is, when this charges against Carlebach came out in the late 1990s, it was before the at Me Too. Carlebach is now front and center in the discussion. Hey, we're doing it right here, right? Over the years, there's been increased awareness of the allegations. Okay. When it comes to contending with powerful abusers in whom the community is invested, no number of accusers is enough to be credible. Wow. He's making is that true?
No.
Right. And if even you finally get them to concede the fact that Carlebach abused women, many of them were underage, they'll just assume that he did teshuva and is therefore not to be held responsible for his crimes. The Jewish community is not yet willing to contend with the idea that such a fundamentally integral cultural, religious, and spiritual touchstone as Carl Sack was an abuser, and his music and his ubiquity represents a priority in the part of the community, right? To quote a friend, Shlomo Carlebach's sweet melodies take on a totally serrated edge because they seem to mock my abuse. Shlomo's perverse legacy is welcomed, but I am not, sings the Nigun. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, my friend suffers every time he hears Carlebach's music, because to him, the fact that we still find it acceptable means the community cares more about its cultural icons than it does about the safety and health of its members. Agree with that? To me, this attitude serves as the clearest illustration of how abuse and its enabling has become so entrenched in our culture and society. The idea that the problem is so big, so ubiquitous, so fully integrated into our society and its cultural history, we are fools to even try to uproot it. Change will not start its own. He talks about, we need to create a society of people who give no abuse, no quarter, refuse to benefit from. Now here he says, refuse to benefit from any of its fruits, regardless of how uncomfortable the loss makes us feel. Here's a plea to say, it's over, no more. But now here's Carlebach's daughter. I thought that was important to hear from her. Neshama Carlebach is an astonishing person as well. I have been to services that she has led parts of. I have been to concerts that she has sung. I have heard her music, and she's very good. She's really quite good. Maybe not at the level musically of her father, but still she's very good. So what does she say? There is an international debate happening this very moment over the fate and worthiness of my father's life and work. I wish he could weigh in. I wish he could respond. I can only watch and assess our broken world. As my father himself said, we have to laugh with one side of our heart and cry with the other. That his life, music, and actions prompt both laughter and tears will likely not cease in our lifetimes. We strive for closure. My choice is to stand. We need to sing and hope even more than before. Finding songs to propel us is essential now more than ever. If there were no songs, we should sing anyway. We find a way. My father's music has been a salve for many and a trigger for others, right? Some people love it. Some people can't even hear it anymore. In the end, those who feel healed by the music I bring, my own and my father's, will be blessed by that. In the end, those who feel that they did not want to include it in their repertoire will not include it. So she's arguing that, the music stands of itself, and for those who are helped by it, that's okay. Those who know me know that my work is about bringing a message of love and transformation. I've infused my work with some of the words of light and love and hope and meaning I learned from my father. I continue to spread that meaning and light and love and hope, even as my own eyes, my own perspective has shifted, even as I grapple with a new language. Of all the challenges I have to face, this moment is the most painful, and I am grateful. The conversation is more necessary than ever, and I am committed than ever to continuing my work, bringing my voice wherever I can, listening well, and sharing my own heart. When I was 9 years old, a trusted friend of my father's, also a rabbi, a fixture in my home, came into my bedroom and molested me. For the child in my heart who has walked through the life in fear since that moment, I thank you all for shifting the tide. Our daughters, our sons, our children must have a better world, and that, friends, must be our focus. We must not stop our work. Okay. Yes, the discomfort is painful, deeply painful, but we are called to lean into it. We must, if we are to transform the world. Some will sing my father's music, some will not, but we are all called to sing a better day into being. My sisters, we have lived too long with the silence that encases our hearts and the sounds of our own sorrows. Today and tomorrow, if we are blessed and we are brave, we will find ways to stand together to make the harmony richer than it's ever been. So what is she saying? And do you agree with what she's saying? What is she saying?
He's separating the art from the person.
Right. She is separating the art. And she is saying, those of you who find my father's music still meaningful, go ahead and sing it. And those of you who don't sing it.
Don't sing it.
I mean, she's his daughter.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
I think
Charlie.
she says one thing that resonates to me.
Okay, what
If
is
my
that?
father was alive today, perhaps he would dispute some of the claims made against him. In other words, what we're doing here is looking back in history, and people are coming after the fact with their complaints, which are, I'm sure some are legitimate, perhaps some are not. The man is not here to defend himself. We all need due process in our lives. We need the ability to defend against those who accuse us. we can't take an accusation as a conviction.
Okay, other reactions to Carol?
I think it's interesting that she herself was abused by a rabbi, by a friend of her father's. She must sympathize and understand the women that he abused, and yet she's able to sing his songs.
Mm-hmm. So
So
she's separated, yeah. Mhm.
she
Okay.
separated his music from his deeds, from what he has done.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, she knew him from father-daughter relationship, which certainly was more powerful. I don't even know what the words are. Sorry.
But her father was there while this man was molesting her, and her father was molesting other people. So she's saying if the music hurts you, don't listen to it. If it doesn't
Exactly.
hurt you, listen to it.
Listen, yep.
Because
Right,
she
Tammy,
empathizes with both sides.
do you agree? Do you think she's right, Tammy?
Well, in respect, she has to be so hurt. And as I said, her father stood by and let her be molested, but she also sees the beauty of the art. So she's just saying, you decide what is best for you because I understand both sides. And I think there's no question he was guilty. I mean, it's one thing if one or two people come through, but if lots of people come through, this man is guilty.
Okay, any other comments?
Yes.
On someone else?
Yeah.
Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I think she's attempting to come to some sort of decision as to where she stands. I think she's using sort of a public forum to grapple with the conflicts that she's experiencing. I don't think she's come to a firm conclusion.
Well, she has come to a conclusion. She says if it works for you, listen. If it doesn't work for you, don't listen. She is saying we should not totally condemn all of the music because of what we know about now. That's what she's saying.
But I think there's how the public is going to feel as opposed to how she feels as a daughter.
Okay, fair enough. Gary, so would you go to a call box service?
Yes,
Okay, still works for you.
still works for me.
Okay. Any other comments on the Shama Karlbach's words? Yeah.
I wonder if today, with what we know about Me Too and everything else, whether she would have spoken out more today, even if her father was alive, and also about this rabbi that molested her. She might not have kept her mouth shut if this happened yesterday.
Mhm. Okay, fair enough. Was there other comment there? Yeah, Rini?
I was just going to say, I feel very sorry for her to have to grow up with a father who was revered, but molested children or women or whoever. It must be a burden on her to this day. I mean, how do you reconcile your own father being like that?
You're assuming, Renee, that she knew what her father was doing when she was growing up.
But now she knows. I think it's difficult. I think it might be very difficult for her. And so that's why she said, she still sings his music. And I think she's so conflicted. It is her father. And
Exactly.
Yeah, you hear that conflict. Yeah. And I would say also, again, I'm not a person who can say this with any absolute conviction, but you certainly no longer see people advertising Shlomo Carlebach. Come to our synagogue because it's going to be an all Carlebach service. That I think is gone, because there are enough people who find it painful as opposed to people who might find it still meaningful. I would also argue there has been a flowering of Jewish music since, when Carlebach was starting to sing, you didn't have how many musical Jewish groups, how many CDs, how many different types of musical service. You know, you can, if you want a lively musical spiritual service, they're all over the place nowadays.
Time moves on.
Yeah. So, but and to some sense, many of them are a legacy.
Rabbi, if he had a son, do you think he would feel differently?
If he had
Today?
a son, wow, that's a good question. You know, the fathers, you know, I think most of us here have children, and there is a love we have for our children that is different from the outside. You know, some of us may have children who've done bad things. You know, I don't want to get into all the politics, but I would have felt a lot better if Joe Biden had simply said, "Look, he's my son, and he's done some really bad things, and I'm his father, and I have the ability to stop him from going to jail, and I'm going to do that." You know,
That's
I wish he had said just those words, and I would have said, "You know what?
Okay, you
I could do
understand.
that. I might have done the same thing." You know, if you have the ability, you know.
Right.
And he unfortunately did not do that exactly, which was, I think, a mistake. But I'm not want to argue about the level of guilt or lack of guilt thereof. But I'm just saying that, you know, parent to a child, that's a tough. I mean, I give her a lot of credit, first of all, for writing that. And I give her a tremendous amount of credit for trying to reconcile what no doubt, you know, you can imagine growing up in Callbox, you know, with your father, you know, you're just surrounded by the music and you're also surrounded by the people who idolize him, right? I mean, you imagine. So there's
Rabbi,
world we grew up in.
this is
Summer.
Sima. Hi.
Go
Can I
ahead.
go back? Can I go back to Biden? The one difference is that he straightened out his life. He was doing bad things when he was not in the right mind, and he did straighten out his life completely and turned it around.
Mhm.
So that kind of, is a big difference. People who don't do that, then you definitely don't want them to be pardoned.
Yeah, but the people in that same situation still go to jail, you know, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
there are
that's
people who go to
true.
jail for what Hunter Biden did, and the question was, you know, I okay, but
All right.
this issue of you know, if you're in a Shama Karlbach, this is you know, you're in a really, I have tremendous sympathy for, you know, what she's trying to reconcile because what has come out, look, there's no, as we said, there's no question, he did, he crossed all the lines in terms of what he of how he responded to him, and I don't think there's any. I really don't see any question with that. So she's dealing with some very
I
I have
difficult.
a question,
Right.
Rabbi.
Who's that?
Rabbi,
Sarah.
Sarah.
Sarah, go ahead. Sure, please.
Yeah. Where was his wife all this time?
That's a question I have no answer for.
Good question.
Right. And the wife usually knows what's going on and did not protect this child either.
Well,
She doesn't
not
talk
only
about,
that. I mean, again, go if you'd gone to any. I mean, I just went to one concert where he was there, and it was very clear he's really hugging a lot of women after the concert. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. Which we all at the time said, "Oh, look, he likes to hug people. You know, he's just a huggy, friendly person, right?" Let me just, as a rabbi, let me say this: we as rabbis can't do that anymore, right?
neither can teachers.
Neither can teachers, absolutely. You know,
Neither can soccer coaches.
or soccer coaches. That is absolutely correct. I mean, I'm not a naturally huggy person, and I have friends and colleagues who are. But we all have to be aware that this is an area, and actually we're going to see that I have some guidelines which are very specific nowadays about you know, the level of physical contact between rabbi and someone else, and not only that, you know, the question as to a rabbi being alone with someone who's of the opposite sex and how that we'll take a look at some of those rules as we go on. But we still got we still will have a chance to look at Joseph. Now, in the interesting case with Joseph, all right, it's a woman who is attempting to seduce a male, right? And in the case of Dina, is how much to what degree is she seen as an innocent victim, or as she is going to be seen as someone who brought it on herself, right? So we'll take a look at those two. We're just about out of time. Yeah, it's only a couple minutes, so it's not really I'm not going to start going into things, but those are the two great other, and Esther, of course, Esther and Vashti. Purim's coming up, guys. And there are questions about how were women treated in the Persian. And again, I'm not going to pretend that Esther's not a real story. Sorry guys, but in the telling of the book of Esther, which is reflective of the values of the time that the story was written, we'll look at that. Okay. We only have a couple of minutes left. Any other comments or questions before we go? Rini?
I can't wait till we get to that text you sent about the woman who was harassed by a fellow congregant for years and years.
Yes. We have a text, which will.
Tammy
That's
and I
going to be a
were
bit
both
later.
mind-boggled by that.
Yeah. The issue there, but again, we've seen all of those issues right here with Karlbach: silence, power, lack of communal response. Before the At Me Too movement, that was very common. And again, there are many prominent clergy leaders, rabbis, priests. Listen, these actions were not so secret, right?
But we talked about that when relating to children, what to do if a child, was abused or molested. And here's
an adult.
Right.
What happens in a synagogue and we'll look at that text where you have an adult molesting and harassing another adult. What is the responsibility of the synagogue, and what are the boundaries that a synagogue must have, and what is the credibility of the accuser, right? And that article also asks that question about the credibility of the abuser. And we've seen, again, with the Karlbach issue, there again, it's a question of, power, silence, who's responsible. Yeah, we'll take a look at those things. This is not an issue that's going to go away. We're trying. We'll also see some of the texts I sent out have some ethical guidelines for these situations. We'll talk about that in the future. Okay. Any other comments before we leave?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good day, and we'll continue the discussion next week. See you then.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.